You've probably heard that Dungeons & Dragons has a... Wait for that plane to pass. You've probably heard that Dungeons & Dragons has a rules update coming soon. But if you've been following the news and the D&D update playtests, you know that a lot of the new ideas have already been scrapped. So for better or for worse, D&D itself isn't getting many improvements with these new D&D rulebooks coming out this year. But there is another. DC20, a brand new game that many folks are calling a genuine evolution of D&D.
This game is pretty much D&D 6th edition. It's the evolution that most people wanted 1D&D to be.
And I agree with most people who summarize DC20 as riding the line between the familiar clarity of Dungeons & Dragons 5e and the mechanical innovations of Pathfinder 2e, with a fair amount of fresh ideas thrown in because it's being developed by none other than the Dungeon Coach, who has been publishing inspiring a D&D 5e homebrew for years. Now, while I genuinely believe that many D&D and Pathfinder players would like DC20 if they only tried it, you may know that recently I've been getting into more rules-light fantasy role-playing games and further homebrewing D&D 5e to make it less complex, which is frankly the opposite direction of Pathfinder. So in this DC20 overview video, I'm going to summarize what I like about DC20, what I don't like about DC20, and what I love about DC20, because it's already given me some inspiration for my game, and then hopefully you'll be inspired to check out this game for yourself, play it with your group, and at least take some of its fun new ideas for your game too. Because I'm Bob, this is where we learn how to have more fun playing RPGs together, and full disclosure, the Dungeon Coach is my friend, and he's sponsoring this video for the DC20 Kickstarter going on right now. But I already told you that this video will include a whole segment of my negative critiques. I no longer make reviews that are purely, oh wow, it's so, everything's amazing. You saw it with my Daggerheart playtest review, you saw it with my D&D buyer's guide just last week. These days, I just want to be more clear about both the fun and less fun parts of any product to ensure that my reviews are actually worth your time. Therefore, I can tell you that the main impact of my bias on this video is 1, because DC20 Kickstarter is happening right now, I'm making this review now, before I've run it myself, but I have already played DC20 and I've read the basic rules and I've watched a lot of videos, and 2, because the Dungeon Coach is my friend, I took more time while scripting this video to politely sandwich those negative critiques into one segment between the good and the great. And I'm excited to hear your comments about all these ideas, so just, smash that comment. Does that work for the comment section? Tell me what you like and what you don't like. DC20, the good. Familiar core role. DC20, as you can probably guess, uses 1d20, roll high, plus a character attribute. There's a plane flying by now. I thought I got away from the trains. DC20 uses 1d20, roll high, plus a character attribute. And this familiar mechanic might be the most underrated part of this new game, because you mostly hear people talking about its action points and its degrees of success and the balance between martial and spellcaster characters, and we're going to get to all that stuff. But in my opinion, it is both simple and smart for DC20 to rely on a core mechanic that is already beloved by the D&D, Pathfinder, and old school gaming communities. You've probably heard there are a few other big fantasy RPGs in development right now, like Daggerheart and MCDM. But Daggerheart is set on using 2d12, and MCDM has been publicly tinkering with its core role for probably a year now, so I don't even know what it is at the time you're watching this video. Versus using the tried and true D20 that most of us already know and love, it just makes the game so much easier for GMs to learn and for their players to at least want to try out for a one-shot. And that's important to me because I believe more people need to just try more games every once in a while. That's how you find fun ideas for whatever game you play the most. Action points. Speaking of fun ideas, instead of needing multiple terms like action, bonus action, free action, reaction, legendary action, layer action, etc., you just have action points in DC20, and you spend these points to do all the same stuff on your turn that you already know. 1 point to move, 1 point to attack, you get it. But you have 4 action points per round, which you can spend however you want, and spend them in more unique ways based on your character's features. However, there's some nuance to things like attacking twice in one turn and using action points outside of your own turn to do things like defend yourself and your allies, but we'll get to that in both the bad and the great segments of this video. Overall, action points seem to keep things simple for new players while simultaneously allowing more advanced players to get more tactical and creative with their turns in combat. Character attributes. This is a simplification that I am 100% in favor of. First, DC20 uses only 4 attributes: might, agility, charisma, and intelligence. None of those words require explanation or reasoning of how one is actually different from the other. If you think about this silly analogy with tomatoes, they just cover the basis of D&D stats in an intuitive way. And second, DC20 doesn't use attribute scores, only the modifiers that you add to your dice rolls. Pathfinder 2e made this jump. Daggerheart does it that way. Many old school games do it that way, and Index Card RPG figured this out like 8 years ago. Using only the modifiers is another intuitive evolution of D&D that makes character creation and character sheets slightly less complicated than they need to be, yet Dungeons & Dragons refuses to do it. Prime attributes. One more thing about DC20 attributes that part of me loves, but part of me does not like, so it ended up in this segment, is the prime modifier mechanic. Whichever attribute has the highest number for your character, whether it's might, agility, intelligence, or charisma, that highest number is your prime modifier. That's what you add to your attacks, your spellcasting, and even your awareness of your environment. I don't know if you could see that, but a bird flew like right overhead when I said that. So yeah, you can have an intelligence-based fighter and you don't have to worry about optimizing for specific stat bonuses based on your class or whatever. But in a game with 12 classes, I think this makes some of the classes less distinct from each other. However, it also means players are encouraged to creatively describe how they use intelligence to be a better fighter, which I've already been tinkering with for skill checks in my home games, and it's been a lot of fun. More good stuff? Really, Bob? Really? Are you sure this review isn't all positive? D20 damage roll. You heard right. Similar to how MCDM and lots of fun old school Renaissance games have taken the D20 2-hit roll and moved it into the damage roll, DC20 is taking that damage roll and moving it into the D20 2-hit roll, which is pretty brilliant, especially for a game with 20 in the name. So if you've only ever played D&D or its variants like Pathfinder and Dungeon Crawl Classics and Shadowdark, then this will be weird when you first try it, but it's fun. Because in D&D, you can roll really high on your attack, even a critical hit, and then roll disappointingly low on the damage. But not in DC20, because check this out. Degrees of success. So you roll 1d20 to attack and you add your prime attribute, but if you only needed a 12 to hit and you rolled a 17 or a 22, those high 2-hit rolls automatically deal more damage. For every 5 higher than the target number, the effect of your action is enhanced. So high rolls are exciting every time. This is a big deal, so it's going to come up again later in the video. And some quick good things. Spell duels. Just like in Dungeon Crawl Classics, a DC20 spellcaster, you can counter an opponent's spell with your own spell, and that is infinitely more fun than just saying, counterspell, haha, now I have canceled your turn, and nothing cool happens. Collision damage. Yeah, instead of slamming into a surface only mattering if you fell on it, now being slammed into a wall or a ceiling or whatever actually matters too, and it's all based on how far you moved or how far you should have moved before hitting that surface. So as someone who likes to play martial characters that jump around and throw enemies, I had so much fun with collision damage during my DC20 playtest session. Low hit points. D&D hit points are ridiculously overinflated, and they make everyone do an unnecessary amount of math when they're trying to play a game. So much so that here we have former math teacher, the dungeon coach, deflating damage. Those big D20 attack rolls fall into damage thresholds for only a few points of damage each, similar to Daggerheart, but without the extra step of rolling to hit and then rolling damage and then checking those thresholds. And character death. You know, actually, I'm going to save that for the love category. That's a really good one. Oh, but one more. Fellow RPG YouTuber creators, Treant Monk and D&D Shorts, both like DC20. Hear me out. These fellows are masterminds when it comes to studying and breaking the mechanics of D&D, and both of them have praised the overall design of DC20. That seal of approval means something. Okay, now I gotta do the sponsor part and remind you, if these ideas sound fun, just go check out the DC20 Kickstarter, link below. There's an early bird bundle of free stuff for these first 72 hours, including collections of one-shots, magic items, and more. That's a car alarm. I don't know if you can... Okay. But all Kickstarter backers get a guide on creating monsters for DC20, and you're getting the core rulebook at the best discount ever. Now here's some things I don't like. DC20, the bad, in my opinion. Like I said at the beginning, this is an overview of DC20, so these critiques are just some broad strokes that I would homebrew around at my table, mostly because they don't line up with the rules-light approach that I favor these days. But, as I've seen in my own video comments, my rules-light ideas are often not very popular with the wider online D&D community, so you might actually love this stuff. Action points as reactions. In DC20, you can use action points to do a couple more things outside of your turn than you already can in D&D, and don't get me wrong, I'm good with certain powerful monsters being able to act out of their own turn. That's important for a big bad guy, and I'm good with player characters holding their turn until some specific trigger later in the round, because then they're kind of sacrificing their turn in order to maybe interrupt another one later. But in general, I just feel like acting on someone else's turn tends to jumble up the turn order, slow things down, and the main one from D&D, opportunity attacks, they don't even really make sense to me. Why does a cruddy little goblin suddenly get to attack twice in one round like a 5th level fighter just because somebody moved near them? What's going on with that? So in DC20, I do like that opportunity attacks are limited to martial characters, but this leads to my next complaint, which is really my main general issue here. So buckle up. Rules granularity. With DC20 sitting between 5e and Pathfinder, oh wait, I should have done like sitting between 5e and Pathfinder, it is by default on the rules-heavy side of this D&D rules spectrum. Okay, and not all rules-heavy games, but certainly these 3 rules-heavy games use what I call granular rules. Let me define it in terms of why I don't like it. Granular rules sometimes force a game master to shut down a player's fun idea for something they want to try to do, because that player's fun idea has already been codified in the rules. Classic example, the D&D 5e fighter subclass Battle Master codifies a bunch of basic maneuvers like tripping an opponent, so a GM, wanting to play by the rules, is inclined to make something as basic as trying to trip an opponent either extra difficult or even impossible for any other character besides the Battlemaster fighter. Now DC20 is much better in this particular case, giving different martial classes different sets of cool combat maneuvers automatically, but at least in the playtest version of the rules that I have, there's a specific granular maneuver to trip an opponent. Spend 2 extra action points on your attack, and the target must make a save against your attack roll or be tripped. So even with this trip feature, it's a contested roll. You're not guaranteed to trip them. You're not guaranteed to deal damage. The only guarantee of this feature is that you can try to trip an opponent. Okay, but that implies to the GM that characters without this feature either shouldn't be able to try, or it should be extra difficult if they do try. Whereas I think every character in a TTRPG should be able to say, I want to try to trip the goblin. Okay, roll might, but he's going to roll against it. And then if there's a trip feature in the game, it just needs to have some clear, guaranteed bonus, like giving you advantage on checks to trip an opponent up to 1 size larger than you. Rules light, done. And again, DC20 does give more freedom than D&D 5e for a lot of this stuff, so it's still an improvement similar to this one. Squares. Yeah, this is my genuinely unpopular opinion. According to a very recent poll from Sly Flourish, about 80% of D&D players use a 5-foot square grid for combat, so statistically, you will probably like movement in DC20, but I don't. I like abstract maps where you still draw things out, you just don't use a strict scale, and you can still easily accomplish all the same tactics and even more cinematic combat in less time. However, I know most people disagree, so we can just move on to the next one. Layout. And take this one with a big grain of salt because I have not seen any mock-ups of the actual DC20 rulebook. This comment is based purely on the alpha playtest PDF, but it's got kinda small gray text on a parchment gray background. So hey, give this video a thumbs up if you agree that Dungeon Coach needs to use a lighter background or a darker font or maybe a bigger font if that's possible, so the final DC20 rulebook will be easier to read and steal ideas from. Speaking of which, DC20 the Great. Action points, stacking disadvantage/advantage. So remember, I can spend 1 action point to attack, and if I want to attack again, I can just spend another action point. Cool. But on that second attack, I'm going to have disadvantage. Roll 2d20, take the lower. And if I want to attack again, I can spend another action point, but it's even harder. 3d20, take the lowest, and so on. So why is multiple disadvantage a great idea? Because not only do you have that flexibility to repeat actions at a cost, but you can also go all in on your action. If you have the foresight to decide, I really want this attack to land, I'm going to spend all 4 of my action points on this one attack, then you only roll once. But you make that roll, not with 2d20 or 3d20, but 4d20, take the highest for a huge, heroic success. I love that, and this DC20 mechanic made me rethink a house rule that I already use called hero coins. Instead of just spending a hero coin to re-roll a failed D20 check and taking the new result, players should have the option to spend the coin for advantage on the initial roll. That's the kind of inspiration I'm looking for. There's another plane flying overhead. I don't even know if you can hear it, but it seems pretty loud. And furthermore, this flexibility to double down, triple down, or quadruple down on an action synthesizes beautifully with DC20's degrees of success, because if you roll 4d20, take the highest, you're probably going to get a big number and succeed in a big heroic way, either dealing extra damage or perhaps, next point, epic spellcasting. This works very similarly to Dungeon Crawl Classics, where higher spell checks mean wilder and more powerful spell effects. And I just love that this idea is gaining some traction outside of DCC because it can be so freaking fun, similar to customized ancestries. This is probably the future for fantasy RPGs. Yes, you can play just as an elf or just as a dwarf in DC20, and I don't think that option would ever go away. But the gist is that you have a number of points to spend on building your own custom ancestry. And part of the reason I love it is because I already plan to do the same thing for the fantasy RPG that I will eventually write, but we've been seeing this trend from D&D dropping racial ability scores to another D&D-like game, Tales of the Valiant, building in this sort of customization, not to mention Crown and Skull having lineages with no mechanical features whatsoever, but everything else being customized with points, because that game's creator, Runehammer, is often thinking like 5 years ahead of everyone else. And I think it'll stick, because this approach is another way for new players to have simple choices, while at the same time making sure that advanced players get to be creative with their choices. Now here's an interesting one. Attribute limits. May not sound very heroic, but to me, this is another smart change that helped me in thinking about how I run my games. And the very simple concept is that your attribute modifiers are capped based on your level. So at level 1, the biggest modifier you can have is +3. At level 5, you can have +4, and so on. This idea that your heroic character doesn't start out with great stats, no, they must grow along the way, is a powerful concept from the hero's journey itself. So I'm a big fan, even though the players might not be, but they will like this one, Death's Door. Instead of going into timeout when your character drops to 0 hit points, you can keep playing. But you only have 1 action point per round instead of 4. You gain exhaustion, you cannot concentrate, and you make death saves, but these aren't 5e death saves. Even if you get a critical success to get right back up with 1 hit point, you still have that exhaustion. So going right back down and gaining more exhaustion actually has consequences, and if you fail a death save, you take -1 HP, and at -3 HP, you die. The end. Good day, sir. And for me, there is no courage, no true heroic fantasy without that risk and these planes flying over again and again. In other words, DC20 is a heroic fantasy game that is built on the familiar foundation of Dungeons & Dragons with new fun ideas from other games and from the mind of the dungeon coach himself. Check out the DC20 Kickstarter through the link below, check out this video on your screen, and thank you for your support through the likes and the comments, and a special thank you to the Bob World Builder patrons who make all of this possible. Keep building.